Hello all, and welcome to A Course in Miracles, Workbook for Students. Today we're on lesson 113 in our review of 20 lessons, 2 a day for 10 days. And according to the introduction to this review, the important thing that this review is trying to do is to get us to use these ideas throughout today, to get us in the habit of using them. So I used to think that it was the content, if I understood or thought I understood the content of what these ideas were, that is what the Course is trying to do. But now I think that it's much more than that. It may even be more important to just, this review lesson says that we have to trust our minds. We give them this information and we develop the habit of thinking on it all throughout the day, 5 minutes every half hour, and then trying to keep it in our mind in the spaces between, so that we develop the habit of using these ideas and letting our mind absorb them and begin to, it's not necessarily about understanding deeply what they're saying, but using them, and stop reacting to life, but start living these truths. And some of the truths that told us at the beginning of the workbook we wouldn't understand right off the bat, that we would even be very resistant to them. But follow the instructions. That's what Jesus in this Course keeps reminding us to do, is to follow the instructions. So the instructions tell us that in the beginning of the day, we're going to use this first one, meditate on it. I am one self, united with my Creator. And at the end of the day, we're going to use this idea. Salvation comes from my one self. And then on the top of the hour, we're going to just stop and spend a moment thinking about the idea I am one self united with the Creator. And then a half hour later, we're going to spend time meditating on salvation comes from my one self, and then do that every hour as best we can. If you forget, pick up where you left off and do that each hour. And that is emphasized more. And doing this, if you do forget, not to feel guilty about it, but just because the ego is resistant to it, and it's going to come up with things for us to do. And it talked about how we want to be aware there are these things that come up. Are they really things that honestly prevent us from doing these ideas at the particular time? Or are they just a camouflage that the ego is using, which is really a camouflage for our unwillingness? So it's watching out for that. And if we are unwilling, just bring the unwillingness to the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit knows it's already there. But if we don't see it, we don't know it's there, and so we can't really transcend it. And what we're trying to do is not to destroy the ego, to kill the ego, but to transcend the ego. We're not attacking the ego, but we're transcending the ego. So let's look at this first one. It's a review of Lesson 95. I am one self, united with my Creator. Serenity and perfect peace are mine because I am one self, completely whole, at one with all creation and with God. So I can't tell you that I totally know what this means to be I am one self, united with my Creator. But as we let our mind chew on this, digest it, and let the Holy Spirit bring this light, bring all illusions to this life, the idea that we are a separate self, separate personalities, disconnected from one another, alone in the world. Bring that, all those kinds of thoughts, that we are separate from God, that we are sinners, that we've fallen from, and we are unrighteous, unholy, all this. Bring those ideas to this idea that I am one self, united with my Creator. And I used to think that for much of my life, having been brought up in evangelical Christianity, that my sins had separated me from God. And of course, that I was separate from everyone else too. And some people I thought I was better than, more special. Other people I thought were more special than I was. And they were separate from me. And there were people that were in the group, in my Christian group, and there were those who were outside of the saved and the unsaved, us and them. And all these kinds of ideas are illusions, and they aren't true. And they are the exact opposite of this idea, I am one self, united with my Creator. And that is the reason, it says, that I have serenity and perfect peace. Because I'm one with myself. I'm one with everybody around me. I look around the room. I see other people. I used to think those other people were separate from me, and I would judge them, and if they weren't Christians, I would think it was my responsibility to tell them about Jesus and make them one of us, kind of thing. Get them to believe what I believed. And I remember verses like talking about denying, where Jesus was said, if you want to be my disciple, deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. And of course I wanted to be a disciple, but to me the idea of denying myself meant that I had to give up everything I wanted to do and do what God wanted me to do. So if it was something I wanted or I liked, or a goal or a profession or a path I wanted to follow, a person I wanted to date or marry, it had to be God's will. Otherwise, if it wasn't, then I have to deny myself and go with God's will, or I can't be His disciple. And then the part about picking up your cross always bothered me, because I didn't want to go suffer what Jesus suffered. It meant, to me, that meant going to Golgotha and being crucified and suffering. And, of course, somewhere in heaven I would be all rewarded, but it meant a life of suffering for Jesus, not denying him, and and all this. But what I now see is that's not what Jesus was talking about at all when he was saying that we have to deny ourselves. Today I see it that he's saying that this idea of you is separate from everyone, as a little self, a little ego, with your own little space in the world, and put up my little fences between everybody else and my defenses, and seeing the whole world as us and them. That self, that ego self, the I, the me, is what he was talking about. That, I believe, is what he meant. Deny that you're that self, that you're that individual self that's fallen, that's separate from God, that's unholy, unworthy. Because if I think that's who I am, then I won't have serenity and peace. Because I'll think that I'm under God's wrath. And everything bad that happens, I'll interpret that as some kind of a punishment or some kind of persecution that God's allowing, like with Job, where Satan was allowed to do just all kinds of things, kill his family, put boils all over him, make him suffer, things like that. But that's not what the Course teaches. Denying ourselves is really seeing that I am one self, united with my Creator. That's where my perfect peace and serenity come from, because I'm not this ego, this, unrighteous sinner, or a sinner saved by grace, but I am the same as Jesus. I am a son of God. And I used to think that Jesus was the only unique son of God, and the rest of us were just creatures, that God just kind of picked a few of us out to save. And just let the rest of them go to hell because they deserve it. And that's what my particular group believed, So, this is the things that kind of come to my mind. Maybe different things will come to your mind. With this lesson, I am one self, united with my Creator. And then the one at the bottom of the hour, salvation comes from my one self. From my one self, whose knowledge still remains within my mind. I see God's perfect plan for my salvation perfectly fulfilled. And this was another idea that my understanding at first resisted, because I always thought that my salvation came from a historical character that died a horrible death on the cross, not because he did anything wrong, but because I was a sinner and he was saving me from the wrath of an angry God. And if I believed in this story, his story, Jesus's, the Jesus of Nazareth story, as written in the Gospels, as a historical, literal fact, if I believe all these things really happened to Jesus, and that he died and rose again, then I was saved. all I had to do is believe those things and confess them with my mouth and be baptized, and I was saved. So this idea that my salvation comes from my one self was nothing like I understood salvation to be. And also the word salvation to me was not being saved so much from my unhappiness or my misery or the things that were going on in my life, depression in this world, but I'm saved in the next world. And that's when I get to experience heaven and happiness and joy and streets of gold and everything I've always wanted. So this idea for me was very different. Salvation comes from my one self. There's only one self, and that self is where my salvation comes from. The same place that Jesus' salvation came from. So those are just a few thoughts that came to my mind when I see this. Today, more thoughts will come to my mind as I meditate on these ideas and review them, and I'm sure they will with you, and feel free if you want to share them with me in the comments section. I would love to hear your experience, and I thank you for doing this course with me and this workbook. And so I look forward to our times together, and I will see you tomorrow. Aloha, happiness and peace to you.